working on this cupcake today. So we've been working on this on our last couple of live streams, but you guys voted to have the last finishing details done as just a real-time tutorial. And then we're going to jump into the next project where we're using our pastels on this Sunday's stream. So that will be at 10 a.m. Atlantic time. But I'm just going to go ahead and do the finishing details on this cupcake because as you can see, we've got our base layers down. So we've got some details there. But now this is the fun step where we get to go in and create a little bit more depth and detail. So I take you guys along with me today. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just do another layer on this pumpkin, and then we're going to start just working our way back up the cupcake here. So I'm going to go ahead and take that jasmine color 1012, and I am using my Prismacolors for this, my Prismacolor pencils, and the sketch and all the supplies should be listed down in the description for you guys. And I will try to have the reference photo over here for you as well on the screen. But I'm just going to start filling our pumpkin in. And I'm going to pretty much put this color over the whole area of the pumpkin right now. And again, I'm not pushing very hard, just a light to medium pressure because I am going to blend this pumpkin out again. But then when we go over the cupcake with the rest of our details, we probably won't need to blend anything else out because we've already got a pretty smooth base going on. I just want this pumpkin here to be a little bit more smooth. So I think that's why I'm going to go ahead and blend it out one more time. And I'm really excited to start our new project this Sunday. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab orange 918. And I'm going to start getting this in more of like the folds of the pumpkin, where there would be some shadows going on. And I'm also going to get it down at the bottom just a little bit where there would be some shadow from the icing. So the pumpkin here is sort of tucked under the icing and behind it. So we would have just a little bit of a shadow down at the bottom. And I'm just going to make sure I have enough of this light color on there to blend out again. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my dark brown and just fill in the stem area here. So I'm doing very simple shading on this spot because I want this to stand out differently from the cupcake. So this is not like a realistic pumpkin that we have here. It's just sort of like a candied pumpkin. So by not having it look too realistic, we're going to know that it's different from the cupcake. And I'm just going to take my Odorless Mineral Spirits here, and I'm going to go ahead and blend this pumpkin out. And then we'll start on our cupcake. And I'm just blending the light areas first, then I'll go blend everything else. You can see how the odorless mineral spirits just really helps blend everything together nicely. And because this is our second time blending with the OMS2, we really don't need a whole lot on our brush. So each time you go on top to blend something out, you want to use a little bit less and a little bit less. Just dragging that brown just slightly. Then I'm just wiping my brush off and just going back just to smooth everything out. Okay, so I think I like how that's looking. I'm gonna go ahead and put that off to the side again. And so I'm gonna start down on the wrapper area and work my way up. So I'm gonna grab that dark brown that we were using for our dark area. And anywhere where I need to just add this into the light areas. So again, our light areas is where the light is catching the side of the wrapper here. I'm just gonna add this color. Now the wrapper on the reference photo, you don't see a lot of detail in it. I've chosen to put a little bit more detail into the wrapper so you can see some of the lines here, but that's up to you how much detail you want to add in or if you want to leave it out. So sometimes, you know, depending what your reference photo is, if you can't see the detail there, like if it's a pet reference photo that you're following or a portrait, if you can't see the detail, sometimes it's best to just leave it out. But for things like this where it's a dessert or it's a fairly simple design, you know, you can sort of add more detail in without it looking fake. And once you get more familiar with certain subjects too, the more you paint or draw subjects, you'll be able to add detail into them without it being there in your reference photo more easily, because you'll know the shape of a wrapper. So you know a wrapper kind of goes up and down into those like diagonal areas. So you'll sort of be able to pick out where those highlights should go. But I always say if you're not sure and you can't see the detail, just leave it the way it is. So I'm going to grab my black again and just darken up any of these shadowed parts here. And for this, I'm really not pressing hard because we've already got a nice blended base. All I'm doing is just sort of smoothing out the areas and just adding a little bit of depth back into some of these areas. So basically what I'm going to be doing for this to add our details in is I'm going to be adding some light areas, some dark areas, most of our colors down. Now at this stage, if you didn't like the color, you could go in and change that a little bit or, you know, glaze some color over top of it. But I'm pretty happy with the color overall. So it's just other things that I want to change. And just really hype up that contrast, because that's going to make your pieces look more realistic, is when you've got your dark areas and your light areas more defined. That's definitely going to help it. And this part goes a lot quicker because now we've got most of our details down. It's just really going in and just bumping up some of those areas a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to go in with my, this one here, my 1002, the yellowed orange. So I'm going to grab that one, and I'm going to do the same thing on the orange areas now. I'm going to focus on the lighter areas of the wrapper and get those in. And then I'll go on top and do some of the darker areas if I need to bump those up. And I don't know if you guys can hear the rain going outside, but it is raining right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just sharpen this a little bit with my electric sharpener. So it's going to be a little loud, but I've just got some tiny areas here, so it's going to be easier. Just enough so I can get just a little bit more of a point on here. And then I'm trying to get this color up close to the black too, just to fill in any gapped areas. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take my terracotta color now, which is 944. And I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the black, just sort of focus it right in the shadow areas. And if I need to adjust anything up in these little areas, I will. But I'm pretty much going to leave those because there's not a whole lot of detail that we can add in. But I just really want to bump up some of these darker areas because that's going to make our lights pop too. If you've got some nice darks in, it's going to make the light areas even lighter. And I'm just trying to stick right along the darker areas here. And I'm just going to go ahead and sharpen this up again with my electric sharpener, just to get a little bit of a finer point. And I'm going to go ahead and start on this side and work my way over. So I like how that's coming out, and I'm just going to hit a couple of these little blue highlights here just to make them just slightly more prominent. Okay. So now I'm going to go in and start working on the cupcake texture itself. And I'm going to go ahead and take my dark umber at first. And so what our cupcake texture is it's like these little dark areas and little light areas. And what I'm going to do is sort of make like these little squiggly textures. And I'm going to use the dark umber for most of the main middle area here. And then I'll come in with my black and do some darker textures. And then we'll come in with our white. And I'll probably use my Polychromos white, and we'll create some highlight areas. And under some of this icing, I'm just going to lay down like a very dark area. So I'm not creating those little squiggles yet. It's just going to be a really dark area where we have a really dark shadow. And I might even come in with the black in some of this too. but I just want to create some really nice depth. And then I'm going to start to make these little like random little textures. So they're not all the same size. They're sort of like little squiggles. Let me get out a piece of paper here and I can show you. So I'm doing like some little dots and some little like squiggle areas like this, just to create like some texture in the cupcake area. That's basically what I'm doing. And I'm going to do it with this dark umber, and then we're going to go in with our black and do it as well. And this is going to create those like little divots in the cupcake area. And once we start getting some highlights in here, it's going to look better. And they're not all the same size, remember, so some of them are a little bit bigger, some of them are a little smaller. Some of them are more like little lines, others are like more rounded shapes. And I'm going to go ahead and grab the black now and do the same thing. And I'm going to do it like under the icing area as well. And if I overlap with some of the other ones that I put down with that dark umber, that's fine. But I'm going to try to focus these ones more towards the wrapper and more towards the icing. And that's going to create some depth too. So I do this a lot, like with cookies, cake, anything that has sort of that like it's got little holes from the cake rising and stuff in it. I use this technique a lot for that. So again, just little circles, dots, squiggles, and try not to make them too uniform or like too spaced out either. And I'm going to make sure I have a little bit more going on over here and on this side, just because it is darker in the reference photo. And I'm really just going back over and making sure it's really textured up. So really what the goal of this is to just get some texture on the paper here. And this is really fun because you can be messy, but keep it small because the little areas in the cake are kind of small. So just gonna see what that's looking like on camera for you guys. I don't even know if you guys can see that, but I will take a picture of it and put it up afterwards so you guys can see. But I can see there's lots of little texture in there. But I'm gonna take this same black and just go right under our icing and just make sure it's nice and dark. I want a nice dark shadow right under the icing. And if I go over some of the texture that I've put down, that's fine. So where the icing comes out into a point, I'm not putting the darkness right there. I'm just sort of going onto the sides and more at the back here, because there would be more light right in that area. And then I'm going to go around just the shape of the wrapper here and make sure it gets nice and dark around there too. And I'm doing about a medium pressure for all of this. I really don't have to press super hard for our pencils to show up. Now I am using hot pressed watercolor paper, but using the odorless mineral spirits really helps because you don't lose any of the tooth of the paper. So it's really easy to go on top with other colors. So I'm just trying to follow the shape of those like little triangle divots and get it nice and dark in there. So I'm going to grab my white Polychromos and I'm going to start getting some light areas into our cupcake here. So I'm sort of going to do the same little like squiggly motions, just as if the light's hitting some areas in the cupcake, but I'm not going to do it as much as our dark areas. And I'm trying as best as I can to go around any of those little like squiggles that I've done, but really it's, you know, that's kind of hard. So it's going to sort of layer on top of it, but that's okay. I just want a little bit of detail, just a little bit of light showing that it's hitting the cupcake in some of these areas. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and take my sky blue light, which is 1086, and I'm going to do the same thing, just create a couple little highlights in here where it's just a little bit more blue, but I don't want this to overpower everything. I just want to show that there is some blue going on in here. And I'm going to focus this mainly right in this area. So again, I'm just kind of going over top of everything. Maybe there's just a glint, you know, down in the dark areas here and there. And then just a couple little ones over there. And then I'm going to go back in with my black and just make sure I've got enough dark areas in between. So I'm sort of just pulling out any black areas that I need to, any darker areas between these highlights. And doing this layering method, that's what's creating our, you know, our nice depth. And if you've got to break up any highlights, if they look a little weird or a little wonky, you can do that. But I try to be quick with this. I don't want to be too methodical, you know, and too thought out of where I place these, or it's not going to look organic, you know, either. Okay, so I think I like that. I'm just going to slightly glaze over a couple of these that are just standing out a little too much. So just lightly tone them down. Okay, so I'm just going to see. Oh yeah, you guys can see that. Okay, perfect. Sometimes, you know, when I'm looking at it, I'm not sure how it's transferring back into the camera, and I'm thinking, does this just look like a dark mess? But no, I think you guys can see it and get the idea. So it's just sort of like these little, you know, I'm doing like sort of these little like squiggles, and sometimes I'll do a line and just like that, and just doing it over and over is creating that texture in our cupcake. All right, so now we're going to move on to our icing, and I'm going to go ahead and grab my Polychromos white again, and I'm going to start getting in some of these highlight areas, so right along the edges of some of the icing here. And then we'll go in and just create a little bit more depth in our icing, and then I think we'll be just about done with this. So some of these areas, I don't need it to be too white, but like along here, we've got to have a nice bright highlight going along. And when we add that brighter highlight, you can see how it makes that shadow so much more darker, and it pops a little bit more. And again, the reason we can get away with putting white on top of these colors is because we've used the odorless mineral spirits. And I like my Polychromos white for this stage because if I need to push a little bit harder for any of these spots, I can, and my lead's not going to break as easily as like my Prismacolor white. And then if for some reason I've gone a little too heavy-handed, I can always pull out my Durer Drawing Chinese white, and this is super opaque, but it is a little bit thicker, so it's not great if you've got little tiny details. And then sort of the last straw that I have is my Touch Up Texture and Titanium White. I can mix that together and get the brightest of brights white highlight, and that will go over top of burnished colored pencils even. So we've got some options, you know, available to us as a colored pencil artist, which is really nice. And the touch-up texture in titanium white is archival. So if you're selling your pieces, it's a great thing to use, especially if you're doing like pet portraits and you need to get that bright white fur over top of something, and you just can't get your pencils to stick. That's a great option for that. So I'm not liking 100% here how this is sort of looking like it's connecting here. So I'm going to come along and break this up, I think, and just have it like an icing part going here and then another part going here. So I'm going to have this come and kind of come down and connect over here. And then I'll come back through with some darks there, just to kind of break that up, because I'm just not liking how it looks. But if you like how it looks on yours, then you can certainly leave it. So there's not much of a highlight right in here, but I just need a little bit lighter. So I'm almost like glazing over, and I just want a little bit of a line right where that dark part is. And then it gets a little bit more brighter over here. And I'm just glazing this down just lightly, just blending it in with that yellow color that's already there, that yellow orange, just because it needs to be a little bit lighter, but not too much. Again, I'm just going to add just a little bit. And I'm just going over top and just dragging this white down just a little bit in some of these areas. I just want to blend it out just slightly. But that's the nice thing with these Polychromos too, is they're very transparent. So if I need to like glaze over top of my other colors just to lighten them ever so slightly, we can do that. So this is a very versatile pencil for me. And I'm just going to keep working down the icing. Now I've got to darken up in here a bit too. And I'm just following this line. And I'm making sure not to go into the darker areas because I really need that to show dark. But I will go in with some of that magenta that we used and put that in. Now there's just the hint of a highlight just down here on the bottom, so I just want to get that in. And then again, I'm following the curve of the icing up, just trying to hit that high point. And again, just doing a little bit of glazing. Now this is a pretty dark area in here too, so I don't want to bring too much light that way, but I'm sort of pulling it down a little bit on the opposite side of the peak here. Just a little bit. And I'm just going to glaze over right here just a little. And I hope as you can see with these little adjustments that we're making, it's really pulling this piece together a little bit more, I feel. You might like where we left it off to begin with, and you could leave it there if you wanted. But if you want to, like, you know, level up your artwork, coming back in and just making these small adjustments makes a huge difference. Just adding these little tiny details. And as you can see, it really doesn't take that much more time to do this. And we've got most of our color down already, so it's really fun. And now this area, I feel like I need to lighten it up just a bit, so I'm just glazing this color kind of over everything there. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it with the white for now. And I'm going to grab my magenta 930, and I'm going to start putting this in just into our darkest areas again. So I'm going to sort of follow along in the middle here where those darkest spots are. And I think I'm going to go in with this Pumpkin Orange 1032. And I'm just going to see how layering it just slightly next to the magenta looks. Just because the magenta is a little harsh just on its own. But I think, so this is the color that we used down in the wrapper. So we're going to get a little bit of cohesive, but I think if we blend the two together, I'm going to get sort of that depth that I'm looking for without it looking too pinky. And I think I like that. Yeah, I think I like how that looks. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in and just darken up some of these areas with this pumpkin orange. Just a little bit, not too far from where we've had it before, because I still want some of that yellow to show. And now I'm going to come right through here and just cut that off. And this is how I like to make adjustments as I go. I just grab a pencil. Let's see if this one works, you know. Is this what I'm looking for? Nope. Okay, let's grab another pencil. So you're just constantly adjusting everything. And using the same colors throughout your piece really gives it like a sense of cohesiveness too, depending what the colors are. So I'm going to grab that magenta now, and I'm just really going to put this right in the middle where the darkest area is. So I'm really looking at that reference photo and just sort of following along the darkest shadows. And some of these areas don't have to go much darker. I'm just sort of glazing a little bit of that color in. Then I'm going to take that white and just sort of glaze over any of the edges that I feel needs to be blended out just a little bit. And I am pushing very light for this, just barely putting that pencil over the paper. Now you could go ahead and blend this out with your odorless mineral spirits as well. But I'm kind of liking the look of just glazing the white over top of this, because it's making sure I'm keeping my light areas intact. Although I quite like the nice darks that I'm getting in this. So even though I'm holding my pencil up here, I'm really not putting a lot of pressure onto it. It might look like I am, but really I try to use the least amount of pressure that I can get away with my colored pencils. Now I'm just taking a look at it overall and just seeing if there's any other little areas that I want to adjust. And I think I'm pretty happy with how it's looking. Might just get this bright shadow in there, bright highlight in there. I'm going to bring just a little bit more light here, so I'm pressing just a little bit harder just to create that highlight that kind of comes across here. Just enough, so I pressed just enough for the pencil to show up. And the cat's telling me it's time to be done again, except he's on the other side of the door this time. So I'm just gonna look in the camera again just to see how it's looking for you guys. And I think I quite like how this is turning out. So I think this is where I'm gonna leave our cupcake for today. So we can go ahead and sign it. And normally I sign my work on the right-hand side, but because we've got this shadow going, I'm going to go ahead and sign it on the left-hand side. And usually I don't sign my stuff right away. I kind of wait and put it away and look at it and see if there's anything that I want to adjust. I'll pull it out maybe a week or two later, just in case there's something I want to adjust near where I'm going to sign it, and then it's not going to look good. But I'm pretty happy with the way this cupcake is looking, so we're just going to go ahead and sign it. And my signature is just an N and a C for my name. And then I do a nice little circle coming from the C. And then I'm just going to go ahead and sharpen this. And then I will just make it nice and dark. Now, some people like to put the date or their full name on their work. I will do that on the back of the paper. I'll usually put what type of paper I used. So this is the Strathmore 500 series hot pressed watercolor paper. So I will put that on the back of the paper. I'll put my name, the date that I've done it, and that way, you know, that information is there, but it's not distracting us from the artwork on the front. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial today, finishing up this cupcake. So come back on Sunday for our live draw along or paint along, depending if you consider pastels drawing or painting. But we're going to be starting a spooky jack-o'-lantern scene. So I hope to see you guys there, and thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know down in the comments below any subjects or mediums that you want to see coming up in the future, because I've only got a couple things planned, but I will certainly, you know, mix it up if you guys want some other tutorials. And look, I've said I'm going to leave it, and I'm already going in and just touching up here, but that's it. That's it. So I am going to call this done, and I will see you guys next time I have a video out. So thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye.